What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some first impressions for Avernum 4, Greed and Glory, a CRPG that you may well have missed given that it released during, I would argue, probably the busiest week for game releases we've had in 2025, back a couple days ago on October 22nd. But obviously it's a CRPG and I love that kind of thing, but also I'm actually pretty excited for this one in particular because I had been going through Spiderweb Software's previous work, stuff like the Avernum series for starters, but Geneforge as well, and they have been in the middle of getting remasters and stuff, which is when I've been taking a look at them. Now, in preparation for Avernum 4 here, I played through the first three earlier this year, though that's not entirely necessary, as Avernum 4 is actually the start of the second trilogy for these games. So it is a perfectly viable place to jump in, and some people may consider that as all the updates from the recent remaster here make this significantly easier to play for a variety of reasons that we'll get into. But first and foremost, I should probably tell you that while I am a couple of days past the release date, I did technically speaking receive a review key for this. Now I use the word technically because this remaster went through a Kickstarter process, and I actually backed that Kickstarter, and I would have gotten a copy of the game from that anyway. Which I mention because these smaller titles, I think, need some support, and so I would have wanted to pay for it either way. Now, all of that stuff said and out of the way, the really cool thing about this being a much more recent title is that it already plays a little nicer than the remasters of the previous three games, which were a little bit older. The third game's remaster, as an example, came out at like the very beginning of 2018. That's worth a mention because those first three games weren't really designed with things like 4K monitors in mind, and so little stuff like resolution could be annoying, and that's not really an issue here. And combined with things like the updated UI and stuff, which is a little more akin to what Geneforge has going on, in fact, it's a little more comfortable to play than those other ones. Now, what actually caught me a little off guard, and keep in mind I haven't played the original version of Avernum 4, so I don't know if this was the case there or not, but Avernum 4 here kind of gets rid of the world map in the sense that the towns and then like the overworld are all kind of seamlessly integrated, and you just go from one to the other, which is new from the previous versions, but also a really cool idea. Because previously it used like a traditional world map where you would like walk over the location and that's how you would enter it, which would then load you into the area map for that location. Here it's all just one kind of seamless thing outside of like extra levels on certain dungeons and whatnot, which I thought was really cool. But some of the rest of this, again, I'm not sure if it was in the original or not. However, what I do know is that Avernum 4 does in fact actually add a bunch of content as well. I'm just not sure exactly what that content is. But coming from the first three games, I know straight away that one of the new things here is that when you are creating your initial 4-person party of adventurers, you can now pick like a background for your party, things like soldier or misfit. And while these do in fact give you little bonuses, what they also do is apparently set up like little individual quests for each one of those backgrounds that are unique to that playthrough, which I thought was pretty cool. So those are some of the kinds of things I will have to see as I go through to 100% this. But otherwise, character creation is much the same. You have the option between your party members being things like a human, a Slith Zerai, or a Nephilim. There was a change here where Nephilim and the Slith can only equip like leather types of armor now, though it's my understanding there was some changes to things like itemization here to account for that as well, but you can't like say outfit a Slith spear warrior like head to toe in proper plate mail type stuff like you could previously. They have to stick to leather, which I would imagine is a bit of a trade-off for the fact that they get all of the extra bonuses from spears and things like that, allowing them to be a little more specialized basically. Now what is changed a bit from the previous three is the progression. So rather than get like a set number of attributes and ability points as you go, you get a set number of like skill points every level that you then have to like point by system into upgrades to things like your attributes or your individual skills. And while the skills and abilities themselves haven't really changed, the exact way that you acquire points in these things has, which is again a little more akin to what Geneforge 1 and 2's remasters have going on. Now story-wise, as I mentioned, this is the beginning of a new trilogy following everything that happened. And the first one, of course, the underground caverns of Avernum, which are home to a vast empire, which has, as the result of the events from the first 3 games, now seeing things like people migrating here to live, start new lives, that kind of thing, has led to a lot of expansion. Our party of adventurers starts out by finding ourselves stuck, actually, because a sort of mandate from the king or the sovereign has ordered a stop to expansion due to some problematic things going on. We get off to a relatively humble start, killing goblins and stuff to help out the fort we are stuck at before we are sent to investigate broader problems that are almost certainly going to devolve into a proper conspiracy at some point. But while that is pretty basic, I'm actually excited to go through it, because one thing I've learned from playing through both Geneforge and the original Avernum titles is that I have, for the most part, been really impressed with where the story goes and the twists and turns it takes, and I'm hoping this one will be more of the same in that regard, but ultimately we shall see. Now, the rest of the game is really just incremental improvements, there's little updates to the graphics, the sprites, and while I realize this might not be the most visually impressive game to most people, it is actually a pretty big step up from Avernum 3 as an example, in terms of just all the art updates, the UI, that kind of thing. Now, speaking of combat, however, this is where the game feels basically the same with Avernum 3, and of course, mostly Avernum 1 and 2 as well. This seems to be where the game does not evolve a ton, with really all that changed across the first 3 games is little additions to spells and how they worked, and just minor tweaks, and I'm expecting that to pretty well be the case with combat here. Probably not going to be any big overhauls, but we'll see how it all pans out. Either way, though, I think that's probably going to do it for a first impressions. Mostly this just looks like some pretty good improvements on the first 3 remasters, bringing in some of the work they've done with things like the engine, the UI, all that stuff. Even technical things like the resolution not being such a hassle to deal with is great. The game being a seamless open world in some respects now. All will, I think, be pretty cool to deal with, though I would say what a lot of it is going to come down to is how strong the story is, of course, and how interesting things like the side content are, especially now that they've added a bunch of new stuff. So plenty of things for me as a CRPG lover to enjoy. However, in terms of reviewing this is going to take a little while. You are seeing this because I wanted to get a first impressions out for the release, but realistically, it's going to take me a little while to turn my full attention to this game. I have to finish up at least one other project beforehand. And then with this being a CRPG that I'm at the very least probably going to have to play through at least twice, my goal is to get it knocked out somewhere around the first week of November, but we shall see how it goes. Either way, though, hopefully you're excited for that review as much as I am excited to actually play this. Genuinely pumped for this one. And I'd certainly love to know how you feel about it as well, which of course means to comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.